There's a moment you might have experienced, maybe recently, maybe it happened just today, where something small triggered a reaction so big it surprised you. Someone raised their voice slightly and you felt your chest tighten, your body brace as if you were in danger that the situation didn't actually contain. Someone gave you critical feedback and you felt not just defensive, but devastated, reduced to something much smaller than your adult self, fighting back tears that seemed completely disproportionate to what was said. Someone you care about seemed disappointed in you, and you felt an urgency to fix it, to make it right, to do whatever it took to restore their approval, an urgency that felt more like survival than social preference. In those moments, if you could pause and ask yourself a strange question, how old do I feel right now? The answer probably wouldn't be your actual age. It might be 7, it might be 5, it might be 10 or 12 or some other age when something happened that you never fully processed, that got frozen in time inside you, that still lives in your body waiting to be activated by anything that resembles the original wound. This is what psychologists mean when they talk about your inner child. It's not a metaphor or a cute way of describing nostalgia. It's a literal part of your psyche that formed during childhood and never fully integrated into your adult self because something interrupted the process. Trauma, neglect, inconsistent love, emotional unavailability, any of the 1,000 ways a childhood can go wrong without anyone calling it abuse. These experiences create parts of you that get stuck at the age they happened, continuing to respond to the present as if it were still the past. You're not crazy when this happens. You're not overreacting, even when your reaction seems too big for the trigger. You're experiencing the activation of a wound that never healed, a child inside you who learned something painful about the world and is still trying to protect themselves using the only strategies they knew at that age. The problem is that a 5-year-old's strategies don't work very well in an adult life. The child who learned to be invisible to avoid a parent's anger becomes an adult who can't speak up in meetings. The child who learned to manage everyone's emotions to keep the peace becomes an adult who has no idea what they actually feel because they've spent so many years focused on what everyone else feels. The child who learned that love was conditional on performance becomes an adult who can't rest, can't fail, can't be anything less than perfect because somewhere inside them a small person is convinced that imperfection means abandonment. You think about your own childhood, and maybe the source is obvious, or maybe it's not. Not all inner child wounds come from dramatic events. Sometimes it's the accumulation of small things. The parent who is physically present but emotionally absent. The household where certain feelings weren't allowed. The subtle but persistent message that who you were wasn't quite right, wasn't quite enough, needed to be adjusted to be acceptable. You might have been told your childhood was fine. You might have believed it yourself for years. But something in you knows that fine isn't the same as nourishing, that surviving isn't the same as thriving, that the adaptations you made to get through childhood have become prisons in your adult life. The inner child doesn't know that decades have passed. When they get triggered, they experience the threat as if it were happening now, as if the angry boss were the angry parent, as if the friend's withdrawal were abandonment, as if the criticism were proof of the fundamental unlovability they've always feared. And they respond with the only tools they have. The same defenses, the same fears, the same desperate attempts to manage the situation that they developed when they were small and had no other options. You've probably noticed patterns in your life that don't make logical sense. Relationships that repeat the same dynamics regardless of who you're with. Emotional reactions that seem to come from somewhere deeper than the present moment. Behaviors you can't seem to stop even when you know they're hurting you. These patterns often trace back to the inner child, to strategies that made sense once and now just make you suffer. The child who learned to people please is still people pleasing, long after the people they were trying to please have lost power over their life. The child who learned to achieve compulsively is still achieving, never feeling successful enough, because success was never the point. The point was earning love that should have been freely given. Healing the inner child isn't about remembering what happened necessarily, though memory can be part of it. It's about developing a relationship with that part of yourself, the part you've probably ignored, suppressed, been embarrassed by, wished would just grow up already and stop ruining your adult life with its childish needs and fears. But that part won't grow up on its own. It can't. It's stuck at the age when the wound happened, and it will stay stuck until someone finally gives it what it needed then and didn't receive. That someone has to be you. No one else can do this work for you. Not a partner, not a therapist, not any external source of love or validation. They can support you, but the actual healing happens when you turn toward the child inside you instead of away. When you acknowledge their existence instead of pretending you should be past this by now. When you start giving them the things they didn't get: attention, acceptance, the unconditional regard that says you're worthy of love, not because of what you do, but simply because you exist. This feels strange at first. Talking to yourself, visualizing your childhood self, asking what they need and trying to provide it. It can seem silly, self-indulgent, the kind of thing that only works for other people. But you try it anyway because everything else has failed. You find a photo of yourself as a child and you look at them, really look, and you notice how small they were, how young, how completely dependent on adults who may not have known how to give them what they needed. And you feel something shift. That child is still in there. They've been waiting a long time for someone to finally see them. The adults in their life didn't see them, not really, not fully, not in the way they needed to be seen. But you can see them now. You can tell them the things they needed to hear and didn't. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. Your feelings make sense. You didn't do anything wrong. You deserved better than what you got. And you can start, slowly, to give them now what they should have received then. Presence, patience, the willingness to sit with their pain instead of rushing them through it. The unconditional acceptance they've been seeking through every relationship, every achievement, every desperate attempt to finally feel good enough. The inner child doesn't heal all at once. The wounds took years to create, and they take time to heal. But something changes when you acknowledge they're there, when you stop running from the part of yourself that still feels 7 years old, and start turning toward them with compassion instead of shame. You carry them with you, this younger self. You've always carried them, whether you knew it or not. They've been influencing your decisions, your relationships, your capacity for joy, and your vulnerability to pain. And now, finally, you have the chance to give them something no one else ever gave: the experience of being truly seen, fully accepted, loved not for what they do, but for who they are. That's the healing. Not fixing them, not getting over them, just loving them, finally, the way they should have been loved all along.